My name is Evelyn Grace, though most people in the neighbourhood simply call me Mama Grace. I am 65 years old, and if you passed me on the street you might not notice me. Just another older woman with fine lines etched across her face, long blonde hair streaked with silver, and eyes that hold far more stories than anyone would guess. But behind these eyes lies a lifetime of sacrifice, love, loss, and betrayal that I never thought I would face. I was not born into comfort or riches. My childhood was spent in a small town where nearly everyone knew one another. My parents were hard-working people, simple, honest, and deeply rooted in their faith. My father worked long hours repairing tools and wagons, while my mother took in laundry to keep food on our table. We were poor, but poverty itself never broke us. It was simply the way life was. As the eldest of 4 children, responsibility rested heavily on my shoulders. I fetched water at dawn, cooked meals when my mother's hands grew too tired, and watched over my younger siblings like a second mother. I learned early that life demands both strength and sacrifice, and that a woman's worth is often measured in how much she can endure. When I was 20, I met Daniel Grace. He was a carpenter, tall and broad-shouldered, with kind hands and an even kinder smile. He was not wealthy, but he was hard-working, steady, and honest. With him, I felt as though I had found a safe harbour in life's storm. When he asked for my hand, I said yes without hesitation. We married in a small ceremony surrounded by neighbours and laughter. I wore a simple white dress my mother stitched by hand, and Daniel promised me that though life might be hard, we would face it together. For years, he kept that promise. Not long after, our daughter was born. I named her Clara, after my grandmother, a strong woman whose wisdom had shaped me deeply. The moment I first held Clara in my arms, her tiny fingers curling around mine, I felt a love so fierce it could shatter mountains. Daniel wept with pride, whispering into her soft hair, "She is our tomorrow, Evelyn. Everything we do for her." Those early years were the golden days of my life. Our home was modest, but it was filled with love. Daniel built furniture in his workshop while I cared for Clara, humming old songs as I cooked and sewed. In the evenings we sat together, telling stories by candlelight while Clara drifted into sleep. We did not have wealth, but we had each other, and in those days that was more than enough. But life, as I would come to know, has a way of testing the strongest hearts. When Clara was just 10, Daniel fell ill. It began with a cough, a harmless sound, or so we believed. But as weeks passed, the cough grew harsher, his strength waned, and soon he could barely rise from bed. I sold what little I could to buy medicine, begged doctors to help us, and prayed with all the strength I had. Yet the illness tightened its grip. One winter morning, as snow fell silently outside, Clara and I sat by his bedside. He reached for my hand, his once strong fingers now frail and trembling. His lips moved, whispering, "Take care of her, Evelyn. Promise me you'll take care of her." I held back my tears, nodding fiercely. "I promise, Daniel, with my life." And then, with a final exhale, he was gone. We buried him under the old oak tree in the town cemetery, the same place we once walked together as sweethearts. Clara clung to me, her little body shaking with grief, and I whispered into her hair, "I will take care of you, my child. You will never go hungry. You will never be unloved." From that moment on, my life was no longer mine. It belonged entirely to my daughter. After Daniel's death, the walls of our little home seemed colder, emptier. His tools still rested in the corner of the workshop, his hammer silent, his workbench covered in sawdust he would never brush away again. Each morning I woke expecting to hear his footsteps, his deep voice calling for breakfast, his laughter echoing through the rooms. But the silence pressed heavy on me. Still, I had made a promise, to him and to myself. Clara was all I had left, and I refused to let her feel the full sting of poverty, even if it meant I carried the burden alone. I found work at a small bakery on the edge of town. The pay was little more than scraps, but it was enough to buy bread and a bit of rice. Every morning, before the sun rose, I tied my hair back, pulled on a faded apron, and walk through the biting cold streets to knead dough, sweep floors and serve customers with a smile I often had to force. My back ached from standing, my hands blistered from washing trays, and there were nights I cried quietly into my pillow so Clara wouldn't hear. But when I saw my daughter's bright eyes, her hopeful smile, the way she carried her schoolbooks with pride, every pain seemed worth it. I reminded myself, this is why I work, this is why I endure. There were times when we had nothing but porridge for dinner, times when I had to sell Daniel's hand-carved chairs and tables, one by one just to pay the rent. The last chair, the one he had built for Clara when she was a toddler, broke me when I let it go. I remember running my fingers along the smooth wood, remembering the nights he carved it while humming softly, the love he poured into every detail. Selling it felt like selling a piece of him, but Clara needed shoes for school. And so, I let it go. The years passed and slowly Clara grew. She was clever, quick with her studies, and always seemed destined for more than the life I could give her. Teachers praised her, neighbours admired her, and I, though tired, though worn, stood taller whenever someone said, "Your daughter is special, Evelyn, she will go far." I sacrificed without hesitation. I worked extra hours, scrubbed extra floors, skipped meals so she could eat. Every coin I earned went to her education, her clothing, her books. I lived with worn shoes, patched dresses, and empty cupboards. But Clara never knew the hunger, never felt the cold, never doubted my love. Still, as she became a teenager, a shadow crept between us. She began to notice the differences. How her classmates had nicer clothes, bigger homes, mothers who wore jewellery and carried themselves with the grace of women untouched by poverty. She looked at me differently, sometimes with embarrassment. Once I arrived at her school to deliver the lunch she had forgotten. As I handed it to her, she whispered harshly, "Mama, why do you have to come looking like that? Couldn't you at least wear something nicer?" The words pierced me, but I smiled and said nothing. That night I sat awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if my love was becoming invisible beneath the weight of my poverty. Still I pressed on. I reminded myself that one day she would understand. One day she would see that every wrinkle on my face, every ache in my bones, every coin I saved was a testament of my devotion. I prayed she would never forget. But I was wrong. The older Clara grew, the more I began to notice the space forming between us. At first it was small things, a shrug when I kissed her cheek in public, a sigh when I asked too many questions, a hurried walk ahead of me when her friends were near. I told myself it was just the way of teenagers, a natural hunger for independence. But in truth it stung. I would sit at the bakery, my hands deep in dough, thinking of how she once clung to my skirts as a little girl, begging me not to leave for work. Now, she hardly noticed when I returned home late, exhausted and smelling of bread. She shut herself in her room, giggling over letters from friends, while I sat alone at the table, my heart aching for the child I had raised with every breath of my being. Then came the day she brought home a young man. His name was Andrew Whitmore, the son of a wealthy family. He was polite, well-dressed, with a firm handshake and a smile that seemed rehearsed. Clara's eyes shone with pride as she introduced him to me, and I welcomed him with warmth, though inside I felt a strange unease. Over the following months, Andrew visited often. He came from a world I had never touched, a world of fine dinners, expensive clothes and polished manners. I saw how Clara changed in his presence. Her laughter grew softer, more restrained. She began to dress differently, style her hair differently, carry herself with a poise that wasn't her own. One evening, Andrew invited us to dinner at his family's home. I remember standing in front of the mirror, holding my best dress, the same faded blue one I had worn to church for years. I ironed it carefully, polished my shoes until they shone as best they could, and braided my hair neatly. But when I stepped into the grand Whitmore house, with its glittering chandeliers and marble floors, I felt as though every eye was on me, weighing my worth and finding it lacking. Andrew's mother, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a necklace that glittered like ice, smiled politely but said little. His father spoke mostly to Andrew, asking about business, ignoring me entirely. Clara sat beside him, laughing softly at his jokes, her hand resting in his. When I tried to join the conversation, she brushed me off gently, as if embarrassed by my voice. I ate little that night. The food was rich, but it turned heavy in my stomach. I excused myself early, walking home alone through the cold night air, my heart heavy with an ache I could not name. Not long after, Clara announced her engagement. She was radiant, her eyes glowing with dreams of a future I had never been able to give her. I smiled, I clapped, I even cried tears of joy for her. Yet deep inside, a small voice whispered, "She is slipping away from you, Evelyn. The world she wants does not include you." The wedding was beautiful. She wore a gown of ivory lace, the kind I could never have afforded, and Andrew looked at her with adoration that made my chest tighten. As I watched her walk down the aisle, her arm linked with mine for the last time, I felt a rush of pride and sorrow. My little girl, the one I had carried through hunger and hardship, was stepping into a life so far removed from mine that I feared she would never look back. At the reception, I sat quietly at a table near the back, watching her laugh and dance among glittering lights and well-dressed guests. No one spoke to me beyond polite greetings. I was the shadow of her past, seated in a corner while she danced toward her future. I told myself it didn't matter, that this was how it was meant to be. She was happy, and wasn't that all I had ever wanted? But I couldn't shake the feeling that in gaining a new life she was leaving me behind. After the wedding, Clara and Andrew moved into a large home on the outskirts of town. It was nothing short of grand, a 3-story house with wide windows, polished floors, and furniture that gleamed with wealth. For weeks, I heard little from them. Clara was busy settling into her new life, and I told myself to give her space. Then one evening she appeared at my door, her arms full of groceries. "Mama," she said brightly, "Andrew and I have been talking. We don't want you living alone anymore. You should come stay with us. There's plenty of space, and I'll feel better knowing you're with us." For a moment, my heart soared. I had been living quietly in our old home, where every corner still whispered Daniel's name. The nights were cold, the house too big without Clara's laughter. The thought of being close to her again filled me with joy. So I packed what little I had, 2 small trunks of clothes, a box of Daniel's old photographs, and Clara's childhood keepsakes I had guarded with my life. When I arrived at their home, Clara showed me to a comfortable room on the 2nd floor overlooking the garden. For the first time in years, I slept on a soft bed, beneath heavy blankets that kept the chill away. In those first weeks I was grateful. I helped around the house, cooking meals, mending clothes, tending the garden. I loved caring for the children when they came. 2 sweet little ones, full of energy and laughter. They called me Grandma Grace, their tiny arms wrapping around me with affection that made my heart swell. For a time, I thought I had found peace again. But slowly, little cracks began to show. Andrew rarely spoke to me. When he did, his words were curt, polite, but distant. I noticed the way his eyes narrowed when he entered the kitchen to find me cooking, or when I folded laundry in the living room. He never said anything outright, but his silence carried weight, pressing down on me like an unwelcome shadow. At first, I ignored it. Perhaps he simply needed time to adjust, I told myself. After all, a mother-in-law living in his house was not what he had envisioned. So I tried to stay out of the way, retreating to my room when he came home from work, speaking little unless spoken to. Still, I caught moments that unsettled me. One evening, as I served dinner, I overheard him mutter under his breath, "Why is she always here?" Another time, when I offered to watch the children so they could go out, he responded sharply, "No, they don't need her to raise them." Clara, my sweet Clara, always smoothed things over with a smile. "Oh, Mama, don't mind him. He's just tired from work." Or, "You know how he is. He doesn't mean anything by it." But I knew better. His glances, his tone, his tightening jaw, they all spoke the truth. To Andrew, I was not family. I was a burden. And yet I stayed. Not for him, not even for Clara, but for the children. Their laughter was the light in my days, their hugs the balm to my weary heart. Little did I know the cracks would soon widen into a chasm I could never cross. It was a rainy evening when the truth unfolded. The house smelled of roasted chicken, Clara's favourite meal, and I had just tucked the children into bed. Their little voices still echoed in my heart. "Good night, Grandma Grace. We love you." As I walked down the hall, I heard Clara and Andrew speaking in the living room. I paused, not intending to eavesdrop, only to wait until they finished so I could pass by unnoticed. But then Andrew's voice cut through the air, sharp and filled with disdain. "Clara," he said, "we can't keep living like this. Your mother is always here. She hovers, she meddles, she takes up space. This is our home, not hers." My breath caught in my throat. Clara's reply came softly, almost pleading. "She's my mother, Andrew. She has nowhere else to go." Andrew scoffed. "She's had her life. She's old now. We don't owe her everything. You pamper her like she's a child. It's embarrassing. What will people say if they see her always here, dressed in those worn clothes, acting like she belongs?" My heart pounded so hard I thought it might break my ribs. I clutched the wall, my fingers trembling, and then came the words that shattered me. "She's a burden, Clara. Either she leaves or I will make her leave." Silence filled the room. In that silence I waited for my daughter, the one I had raised through hunger and hardship, to defend me. To say, "No, Andrew, she is my mother. She stays." But the words never came. Instead, Clara whispered, almost too softly to hear, "I'll talk to her." 1,000 memories rushed through me in that moment, nights of skipping meals so she could eat, years of aching hands to pay for her books, the promise I'd made to Daniel at his deathbed, take care of her. And this was how my daughter repaid me? I slipped quietly back to my room, tears burning my eyes. That night I did not sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, clutching Daniel's photograph, whispering, "I did everything for her. Why is this my reward?" The next morning, Clara knocked on my door. Her face was pale, her smile forced. She sat beside me and took my hand. "Mama," she began, her voice trembling, "Andrew and I think it's time you had your own place again. Not because we don't love you, but because we think it would be better for everyone. You need your space. We need ours." I looked into her eyes, searching for the little girl who once clung to me so tightly, who once swore she would never leave me. All I found was silence and shame. I nodded slowly because I had no strength to fight. A week later, I left their house with a single suitcase. Rain poured from the sky as I walked down the street, each step heavier than the last. No carriage waited, no umbrella shielded me. Just me, my bag, and a heart heavier than stone. Behind me, the lights of their grand home glowed warm, but its doors were closed to me forever. The room I found was little more than a box with 4 cracked walls. The ceiling leaked when it rained, and the floor was so cold at night that I laid down old newspapers just to keep the chill from biting my bones. The window pane rattled with every gust of wind, and outside the street smelled of smoke and damp earth. It was nothing like the warm, wide home I had left behind, but it was all I could afford. The landlady, a kind woman with a wrinkled face and tired eyes, handed me the key without asking too many questions. "It's small, but it'll do," she said. I nodded, forcing a smile. I didn't want pity. I had carried too much of that already. I placed my single suitcase by the bed, a narrow frame with a thin mattress, and sat down, staring at the silence that swallowed me whole. For the first time in my life, I felt truly alone. The days blurred into one another. I rose early, walked to the bakery where I had begged for part-time work, and spent long hours sweeping flour, shaping bread, serving customers who barely noticed me. The pay was barely enough to cover rent and a little food. Most nights, I ate nothing more than rice with salt or a crust of bread softened in water. Hunger became my companion. Loneliness, my shadow. I often sat by the window at night, clutching Daniel's photograph, whispering to him. I tried, my love. I tried so hard. I gave her everything. Why does she not see me anymore? Why did she let me go so easily? There were moments I thought of Clara, her laughter, her smile when she was little, the way she once clung to me and called me her best friend. I told myself that perhaps she was too young, too blind, too wrapped up in her new life to understand what she had done. Maybe one day, when she looked back, she would regret it. And yet, as the weeks turned to months, no letter came, no visit, no knock at my door. One evening, with the last coins I had, I sold the last piece of jewellery Daniel had given me, a small silver locket, engraved with our initials. As the pawnbroker dropped the coins into my hand, I felt a piece of my soul slip away. That locket had been my tether to the life we once had, to the love that had sustained me. But hunger does not wait for sentiment. I walked home that night through the rain, clutching bread to my chest, tears mixing with the storm. Still deep inside me, a flame refused to die. I told myself, I have survived worse. I will survive this. And somewhere in the quiet corners of my heart, I began to believe that life had not finished with me yet. I did not know it then, but my darkest nights were only preparing me for a dawn I never expected. It began with a single coin saved. Each week after paying rent and buying what little food I could, I forced myself to set aside a tiny portion. At first it was laughable. A few copper coins rattling in an old tin box I kept hidden under the bed. But I remembered what Daniel once told me. Even the tallest oak tree starts as a single acorn. So I saved. Day by day, week by week, the little pile grew, and with it, so did my determination. I no longer cried at night. I no longer whispered to the walls about my hunger. Instead, I whispered to myself, this is not the end. This is the beginning. One morning, on my way home from the bakery, I passed a notice pinned to a wooden post. It announced a property auction, houses, shops and land being sold by the town council. Most people walked past it without a second glance, but something in my heart stirred. My hands trembled as I tore off a small slip of paper with the auction details. Could I dare? Could I, a woman with nothing but calloused hands and a box of coins, step into a world of buyers and bidders? For days, I thought of nothing else. My mind swirled with fear and hope, doubt and determination. Then one evening I opened Daniel's old notebook, the one where he used to scribble ideas for furniture designs. Inside the cover, in his familiar handwriting, were the words, "Never be afraid to claim what is yours." That was my sign. I spent the next weeks preparing. I spoke to neighbours, asked questions quietly, and learned that sometimes in auctions, a piece of property would go unsold or be overlooked. Prices could fall lower than expected. Perhaps, just perhaps, I had a chance. When the day of the auction came, I wore my best dress, pressed as neatly as I could, and walked into the crowded hall with my head held high. Inside, the air buzzed with tension. Men in fine coats and women in jewels sat with their numbered paddles, whispering among themselves. I clutched mine tightly, my palms damp with sweat. The bidding began. Shops, farms, land, all selling for sums far beyond my reach. My heart sank with every call of sold. Yet I stayed, waiting, praying. Then, near the end of the list, the auctioneer announced, a small cottage with adjoining land, located just outside town, opening bid, modest. A murmur rippled through the room. It wasn't a grand estate, not a prized piece of land, just a humble home. And for that reason, few seemed interested. My heart pounded. This was it. My chance. The auctioneer's voice rang out. "Do I have a bid?" For a moment, silence. Then, from somewhere across the room, a man raised his paddle. The bidding began, low at first, creeping higher. My hand shook as I lifted my paddle, my voice barely steady as I said, "Here." The man glanced at me, dismissive, and raised again. I raised mine. Back and forth we went, my heart racing, the room spinning, my palms slick, my throat dry, my very soul stretched thin with fear. At last the man shrugged and lowered his paddle. No one else joined in. The auctioneer's gavel slammed down. "Sold!" The word rang in my ears like a church bell. My knees nearly gave way. I had done it. Tears blurred my vision as I signed the papers with trembling hands. A cottage. My own roof, my own walls, my own ground to stand on. No longer would I be a shadow in someone else's home. No longer would I beg for scraps of kindness. For the first time in years, I walked through the streets with my head lifted high. The key to the cottage pressed into my palm, warm and solid. My future, at last, was mine again. And deep in my heart I whispered, "Daniel, I did it. We have a home again." While I, Evelyn Grace, was slowly piecing my life together, the walls of Clara's golden palace were beginning to crack. It started with whispers. Andrew's business, once the talk of the town, was faltering. Markets shifted, investments soured, and the proud man who once boasted of his wealth began returning home with a clenched jaw and a storm behind his eyes. Clara, still basking in her luxurious life, ignored the warning signs. She spent lavishly, throwing parties, buying dresses, surrounding herself with friends who adored her for her new status. But money has a way of slipping through fingers when guarded only by pride. Soon the laughter in their house dimmed. Bills piled on tables, servants whispered of unpaid wages, and when creditors began knocking at their door, the illusion of grandeur could no longer be sustained. Andrew's voice grew harsh. Arguments filled the once proud home. Clara, who had once spoken to me with cold disdain, now faced the same chill within her own walls. The man she had chosen over her own mother began to see her as a burden, not a partner. One evening, as I was tending my small garden by the cottage, I overheard two townsfolk passing by. "Did you hear? Andrew Hollis's company is collapsing. They say he gambled too much on risky deals." And his wife? Poor thing. She was once radiant, now she's hardly seen without tears. Their words pierced me, not out of spite but out of sorrow. Clara, my daughter, was suffering. And though she had cast me out, though she had left me to starve, I could not erase the years I spent holding her in my arms, singing her to sleep, guiding her first steps. Still, I did not rush to her side. I knew the world was teaching her lessons she had refused to learn from me. It wasn't long before the final blow struck. Andrew, drowning in debt, packed his belongings and disappeared in the night. No goodbye, no explanation. Just gone. Clara woke to an empty house, creditors waiting at the gate, and nothing left to cling to. The very friends who had once toasted her beauty and fortune now vanished like mist in the sun. When I next saw her, she was standing in the marketplace, clothes worn thin, hair unkempt, her once proud face pale with worry. She was speaking to a merchant, pleading for work, any work, but he shook his head. I stayed hidden, my heart heavy. I wanted to run to her, to take her in my arms and say, "Come home, child, you will always have me." But I did not move. Not yet. Because I knew. She had not yet reached the place where pride gives way to humility, where the heart opens enough to truly see. For now, all I could do was watch. And wait. For the wheel of life was turning. It was a cold evening when the knock came. I was sitting by the fire in my little cottage, knitting slowly, the silence around me broken only by the crackle of wood. For months, my days had passed in quiet rhythm, work in the garden, a little baking, sometimes helping the neighbours with sewing. A life of peace, though small, had finally begun to grow in my hands. But that knock, it was timid, almost fearful, like the hand that struck the door did not know if it deserved to. I rose slowly, the years of hardship making me cautious, My fingers wrapped around the handle, and when I pulled the door open, my heart stopped. There she was, Clara. My daughter, who once shone brighter than any jewel, now stood before me in rags. Her eyes, once filled with fire, were red from sleepless nights and swollen with tears. Her hair was tangled, her lips trembling. She clutched her arms around herself as though holding together the pieces of a shattered life. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the wind howling across the fields. Finally, she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Mother." I could barely breathe. The word I had longed to hear again. The word I thought might never leave her lips. It was here, broken and fragile. I was wrong," she stammered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Andrew is gone. The house is gone. Everything is gone. And now, I have no one. No one but you. Please, forgive me. Please, let me come home." Her knees buckled and she fell against my doorstep, sobbing into her hands. My heart ached. Every part of me wanted to kneel, to lift her up, to wipe away her tears like I had done when she was a child. For she was still my daughter, my flesh and blood. The bond of a mother's love is not so easily erased. Yet, the memories of those nights in the cold room, of the hunger gnawing at my belly, of her voice when she told me to leave, they rose like ghosts in the firelight. I closed my eyes. "Daniel, what would you have me do?" I asked in silence. When I opened them again, Clara was still kneeling, still trembling, still waiting for my answer. I knelt beside her, my voice soft. "Clara, my child, you broke me once. You cast me aside as though I were nothing. Do you know how deep that wound went?" She nodded frantically, her tears falling onto my hands. "Yes, Mother, yes. And I will never forgive myself, but please, don't turn me away. Not now. I have nowhere else to go. I need you." The air was thick with silence. At last I drew a deep breath and whispered, "You may come inside." Her head lifted, eyes wide with disbelief. I stepped back, opening the door. She stumbled across the threshold and fell into my arms, clinging to me as though she would never let go again. And though pain still lingered, though scars still burned in my heart in that moment, I held my daughter. Clara slept that first night on a small cot I set up by the fire. I gave her one of my extra blankets, though the fabric was thin and patched from years of wear. She curled into it without complaint, exhaustion pulling her into a heavy sleep. I lay awake long after, staring at the ceiling. My heart warred with itself, one side aching with love, the other cautious with pain. Was this return born of true repentance, or only of desperation? By dawn I resolved not to let sentiment cloud my eyes. Forgiveness is sacred, but trust must be earned. The next morning I handed Clara a small wooden bucket. "The well is just beyond the garden," I said simply. "If you wish to stay here, you must help. This home is humble and I cannot carry its weight alone." She looked startled, perhaps expecting tenderness instead of labour. But after a moment's hesitation, she nodded, took the bucket, and went. Through the days that followed, I set her to tasks, washing clothes by the stream, gathering wood for the fire, kneading bread with flour I had carefully rationed. I watched her closely, not with cruelty, but with quiet judgment. There were times I saw her falter, her soft hands blistering, her back aching from bending low. Once she broke into tears, dropping the basket of wet laundry, crying, "I was not made for this." I approached her then, my tone calm, but firm. "Nor was I, Clara, but I did it, for you. For years I bore every hardship so that you could be clothed, fed and safe. And when the time came that I needed you, you cast me aside. Tell me now, was I not worthy of the same?" Her tears fell harder, her voice trembling. "I was blind, Mother. I thought love was in riches and fine things. But now I know I was wrong. Please let me prove it to you. Let me try. And so, she did. Slowly, day by day, she began to change. She rose early, sometimes before me, to sweep the floors. She burned her hands baking bread, but she did not give up. She fetched water without complaint, even in the cold dawn. And when she caught me watching, her eyes no longer carried the arrogance of before, but a soft humility. One evening, as we sat together by the fire, she turned to me, her voice quiet. "Mother, I don't deserve your kindness. I don't deserve even this roof over my head. But if you can find it in your heart to forgive me, I swear I will never fail you again." I looked at her for a long time, the firelight dancing across her face. The face of the child I once rocked to sleep. The face that had once wounded me so deeply. And though the scars of betrayal did not vanish, I felt something stir within me. A peace, a release. I placed my hand on hers. Forgiveness is not given in words alone, Clara. It is proven in how we live from this day forward. If you mean what you say, then let your life show it. Her fingers tightened around mine, and she whispered, "It will, Mother. It will." That night, as I lay down, I realized something I had not felt in years. Not bitterness, not sorrow, but hope. The days passed, and with them Clara's resolve grew clearer. I saw it in the way she rose before the sun, her breath clouding in the morning air as she carried water from the well. I saw it in her hands, once delicate, now roughened by work, her nails chipped, her palms raw from chopping wood and scrubbing clothes. And yet she never complained. Sometimes I caught her staring at me when she thought I wasn't looking. Her eyes no longer held pride or defiance, but something gentler. Remorse, yes, but also longing, as though she were trying to memorize every detail of my face, afraid she might lose me again. One evening, as we prepared supper together, Clara broke the silence. "Mother, do you remember when I was small and you used to sing to me at night?" Her voice trembled. I paused, knife in hand, the memory flooding back, nights when she curled against me, her tiny hand clutching my sleeve, her eyes heavy with sleep as I sang softly. "Yes," I whispered. "I remember." She swallowed hard. I thought I had outgrown needing you. I thought love could be replaced by wealth and comfort. But the truth is, even when I had everything, I felt empty. Because I had lost you. Her words pierced me deeper than any blade could. I set the knife down, turned, and pulled her into my arms. For the first time since her return, she did not resist, did not hesitate. She clung to me like a child again, her sobs breaking against my shoulder. "Shh," I murmured, stroking her hair as though she were still little. "We cannot change the past, Clara, but we can choose how we walk forward." That night, we ate together at the table, and though the meal was simple, a loaf of bread, a pot of stew, it felt rich, it felt whole. As weeks turned into months, the wounds between us began to close. Slowly, tenderly, we learned to laugh again. Clara began helping not just me but others, offering her hands to neighbours, sitting with widows, playing with children in the fields. The same woman who once looked down on the poor now sat among them, as though she had always belonged. One afternoon, a neighbour pulled me aside, a smile on her face. "Evelyn, your daughter has a good heart. Whatever mistakes she made before, she is making up for them now." Tears welled in my eyes at those words. For in Clara's humility, I began to see not the spoiled child who cast me out, but the woman she was becoming, a woman of strength, compassion and grace. And though scars still lived quietly in my heart, I knew then that forgiveness had taken root. Mother and daughter, broken apart by pride, were slowly being stitched back together by love. Spring arrived, painting the fields in colours of gold and green. Life in the village began to stir with renewed energy. Markets bustled, children laughed in the lanes, and neighbours gathered for the annual harvest festival, a day when the town came together to celebrate, share food, and honour those who had given much to the community. I had never planned to attend. For years I had lived in the shadows of shame, spoken of only in whispers. The mother cast out by her own daughter. But Clara insisted we go. "Mother," she said one morning as she braided her hair, "the time has come. They must see you as I see you. They must know the truth." I hesitated, my heart uneasy. "Clara, the people will talk. They always do." She placed her hand on mine, her eyes steady. "Let them talk then, but let them talk of your strength, your love, your forgiveness, not of lies and pride." And so I agreed. The festival square was alive with music and laughter. Stalls overflowed with bread, fruit, and roasted meats. Children ran between the dancers while fiddlers played lively tunes. Yet as Clara and I stepped into the square, the air shifted. Heads turned. Whispers rose. "There she is. Evelyn Grace. Isn't that the one her daughter abandoned?" And now they walked together again. I felt the weight of 100 eyes, shame prickling my skin. My instinct was to turn back, but Clara held my hand tightly and led me forward, her chin high. When the mayor climbed onto the wooden stage to begin the announcements, Clara suddenly stepped forward. Her voice, once timid in repentance, now rang clear across the crowd. "Please, allow me a moment to speak." A hush fell. Clara took a deep breath, her eyes sweeping over the townsfolk, her voice steady though her hands trembled. "Many of you know me as Clara Hollis, wife of Andrew. You knew our home, our parties, our wealth. But what you do not know, or perhaps what you have forgotten, is the truth behind it all." She paused, turning to look at me. "This woman, Evelyn Grace, is my mother. The woman who worked her hands raw to raise me, who sacrificed everything to give me a future. And when I gained comfort, I repaid her with betrayal. I cast her aside when she needed me most. That was my greatest sin." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Faces softened. Some turned away in shame, as though remembering their own silence when I was cast out. Clara's voice broke, but she pressed on. "But this woman, my mother, took me back when I had nothing. She forgave me, even when I did not deserve it. And it is because of her that I stand here today, humbled, alive, and whole." Tears blurred my vision as I listened. Clara stepped closer, took my hand, and lifted it high before everyone. "This is Evelyn Grace, my mother, my salvation, my strength. If you speak of me, speak first of her." The square erupted, not with laughter or scorn, but with applause. Some wept openly. Neighbours approached, heads bowed in respect. One by one, people came to me, offering kind words, food, gifts. For the first time in years, I did not feel like a shadow. I felt seen. And as I stood there, my daughter's hand in mine, the sun warm on my face, I realised the circle was complete, from abandonment to restoration, from shame to honour, not by riches, not by pride, but by love, tested, wounded, and finally healed. Time softened the raw edges of our wounds. Months rolled into years, and life within our small cottage blossomed with peace. Clara, no longer the proud and reckless daughter who had once cast me aside, had grown into a woman of depth and gentleness. But what surprised me most was how her change began to touch others. The village girls, many of them just entering womanhood, would come to Clara for advice. Some were drawn by her beauty, others by curiosity about her past. At first she shied away, ashamed of her old life, but one afternoon she gathered them beneath the oak tree near the square and spoke openly. "I once believed riches would bring happiness," she confessed, her voice steady though her eyes glistened. "I thought I was too important for hard work, too clever for humility. And I made the worst mistake a daughter could make. I turned my back on my mother. Do not follow that path. Honour those who raised you, for their love is worth more than gold." The girls listened in silence, their eyes wide, some of them even in tears. From that day on, Clara became a quiet mentor to them, teaching not with superiority, but with the humility of one who had fallen and risen again. As for me, I found my role shifting as well. Neighbours began to visit, not out of pity as before, but to seek counsel. Mothers asked how to raise their children with patience. Widows sought comfort in my words of survival. Even men in the marketplace tipped their hats and called me Wise Evelyn. It was strange, after so many years of being overlooked, to suddenly be regarded with such respect. Yet I accepted it, not for vanity, but for the chance to spare others the pain we had endured. Together, Clara and I created a home that welcomed not only ourselves but others. The poor found bread at our table. The weary found rest by our fire. Children laughed in our garden as Clara taught them small songs I had once sung to her. And as I watched my daughter kneel among those children, her laughter ringing through the air, I saw in her the same fire she had as a child, but now shaped by wisdom, softened by love. It was then I understood. Our suffering had not been in vain. It had forged something greater, something meant to be passed down to the next generation, so they would learn the value of humility, love and forgiveness without needing to stumble as we had. The wheel of life had turned, and what was once broken was now whole. The years have been kind, and though my hair has grown silver and my hands bear the marks of time, my heart feels lighter than it did in my youth. I have walked through sorrow, betrayal, loneliness and despair. Yet here I stand, whole, at peace, and surrounded by love. Clara sits beside me often in the evenings, knitting quietly while the fire glows in the hearth. Sometimes, when the flames dance just right, I see her as the little girl she once was, laughing, tugging at my skirts, asking me to sing one more lullaby. Other times I see her as the broken woman who came back to me in tears, humbled and afraid. And now I see her as she truly is, my daughter, redeemed. If there is anything my journey has taught me, it is this. The bond between a mother and child cannot be broken by wealth, pride, or even betrayal. It bends, it stretches, it aches, but in its truest form, it survives. To the daughters who may hear my story, remember this. Your mother's sacrifices are written in the silence of her hands, in the sleepless nights she bore, in the meals she went without so you could eat. Do not cast her aside when the world offers you riches, for when the gold fades and the crowds disappear, it is her arms you will long for. And to the mothers who suffer as I once did, hold on. Do not let bitterness harden your heart. Sometimes the child who wounds you may yet return, carrying lessons carved by life itself. Forgiveness does not erase the pain, but it plants the seeds of peace. I am not the same woman who was thrown into the cold with nothing but tears. I am stronger. I am wiser. And I am living proof that what is broken can be mended, that what is lost can be found again. When I close my eyes for the last time, I do not want my story to be remembered as one of tragedy, but as a testament that even in the face of betrayal, love can endure and forgiveness can heal. And so, with a grateful heart, I whisper to the heavens where my Daniel surely watches. We did it, my love. Clara came home. The fire crackles softly. The night sky bends low with its stars. And in this quiet moment I know, my story is not just mine anymore. It belongs to every mother, every daughter, every family broken and mended again. This is my lesson. This is my legacy.